Mr. Nominee, Senator
Order, please.
Udo Udoma, welcome you to the chambers. As you stand here, if you would like to tell us name and brief introduction of yourself. We have your CV, so there is need not to talk at length on what you already have on CV, but there's something that you want to emphasize on, some things you also want to tell us. This is an opportunity to tell us some of those issues you want to highlight that are important. And also to tell us more, I think, since you left the chambers, all the other things you've been able to do, since we know some of the roles you've played before then. You are welcome.
Thank you very much. Is it on? Distinguished. Hold on. Distinguished Senate President, distinguished Deputy Senate President, distinguished leaders of the Senate, distinguished senators, I am indeed really delighted to be appearing today before this distinguished Senate. I recall with fond memories my 2 terms in the Senate. I feel very privileged to have had that experience, to be among such distinguished people who have established themselves in their various walks of life. Being in the Senate is indeed a unique experience, and I consider my time in the Senate as truly the high point of my career. So that is why I bear that title with pride. As the distinguished Senate President said, what have I been doing? When I left this distinguished Senate in 2007, my intention was to concentrate on my professional and corporate interests. And I have to say with all modesty, that things have gone quite well for me. I'm now the chairman of 2 iconic Nigerian institutions, UAC and Union Bank, as well as having been able to grow my law firm. So I haven't actually been involved in partisan politics for some time. So I was very surprised when the president nominated me to serve as a minister. I'm indeed honored and delighted to accept. And I'm honored for 3 reasons, and I will just go briefly. First, I'm inspired by the personal example of President Muhammadu Buhari. I'm impressed by his integrity, his abhorrence of corruption, his determination to run a transparent and accountable administration. So I was flattered, honored by his confidence in me, to call me to come and help. And I can assure Nigerians, if confirmed by the Senate, I will give my very, very best in the discharge of that very onerous responsibility. And let me say why I believe I have something to offer. I believe in all humility that my extensive private sector practice, my experience in motivating and managing large numbers of people, in setting objectives and meeting them, in cost management, in driving cost out of operations, and most importantly, in helping to restore and turn around moribund institutions. That is what I'm bringing from the private sector. But I also understand the way the public sector works. I was the pioneer chairman of the Corporate Affairs Commission, and more recently, chairman of SEC. And I fully appreciate the very difficult challenges involved in implementing public sector reforms, which will be required to turn this economy around. I've also chaired a federal government task force that extensively examined the reforms needed in the oil industry and supervised the production of a draft PIB. And whilst a member of this Senate, I served as chairman of the Appropriation Committee, subsequently as chief whip. Therefore, distinguished senators, I will not be going into government to begin to learn about the issues and problems. In short, I feel ready. I feel prepared to hit the ground running in tackling the challenges inherent in trying to bring about change in the public sector. Finally, distinguished senators, these are very, very difficult economic times for Nigeria. With the dramatic fall in the prices of crude oil, public sector finances are under pressure. Many states have difficulty in paying salaries. The naira is being buffeted. The values in the Nigerian Stock Exchange have been seriously eroded. These are difficult times, times in which all Nigerians of goodwill must come together to work with Mr. President to salvage the situation. The elections are over. We must now all work together for the betterment of our country. As President Buhari himself said in 1983, this generation of Nigerians, and indeed future generations, have no country other than Nigeria. We shall remain here and salvage it together. So, distinguished Senate President, distinguished Deputy Senate President, distinguished leaders, distinguished senators, it is for the reasons I have just set out that I appear this morning to seek your confirmation to serve as a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Distinguished and Ministerial nominee, thank you for what you've said, we've heard. Going through your CV, we noticed your experience, as you said, being in the private sector and also 2 terms in this respective chamber. And I'm sure with that experience, my question is, or really, to throw some light to your experience and share with us the kind of policies you think you will push to improve foreign and direct investment in Nigeria, because I see in your CV you talked about investment law and problems relating to the control and regulation of foreign investment in Nigeria. And in these difficult times, I'm sure that will be of great value.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. In order to turn this economy around, we cannot rely solely on public sector investment, because public sector is limited by the price of crude oil. That is a fact. So we have to stimulate the private sector. In order to do that, we must improve the enabling environment for private sector investment. Right now, Nigeria is ranked 170 out of 189 in terms of ease of doing business. We have to address those issues. We have to look at the ease of things like conveyancing, property, titling. We have to look at even the various policies. For instance, the policies for manufacturing. There has to be consistency. We have to, ahead of time, let people know what our plans are, because what investors want is consistency. They don't like chopping and changing. You must tell them what your plans are, you must listen to them, and you must make adjustments to accommodate investment. Right now, Nigeria has about 20%, our investment rate is 20% of GDP. The UNDP have indicated that for us to achieve a 10% growth, which is the target that President Buhari set in his election campaign, for us to achieve that, we have to increase our investment rate to well over 30%. To do that, we have to provide very many things in terms of the enabling environment. But I can go into a lot of detail about that. We have, for instance, EPZs. I actually chaired a committee that looked at this particular issue and looked at what incentives. We have to look at, for instance, things like tax-free policies have not really worked. So we have to review that. We have to look at our tax policies. So there's quite a lot that we have to do. And I'm ready to help in designing it. And because I am coming from the private sector, I speak their language, I understand them, and I understand their needs. Thank you.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, Senator Udoma, we are aware that you've worked in a number of reform issues, one of which is the issue of the PIB bill. Now that you are going to be part of the government, what will be your advice in terms of pursuing the ideals of that bill and to ensure that it is processed and passed to the benefit of Nigerians? The second question is regarding the last political conference. Nigerians met and agreed on a number of issues. Now, what will be your advice regarding the implementation of those recommendations contained in that document? Thank you.
The single center, if you can answer to this question. If you answer those few questions. Yes.
Let me answer the question.
Yeah.
Let me answer. Okay. Ashubangu, answer the questions. Okay, let me. All right. Let me. Okay, let me just quickly answer the one about the PIB. Let me answer quickly the one about the PIB. I think in what should I do?
Leader of the Senate. Distinguished colleagues.
Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Mr. President, I think the wish of the distinguished colleagues should be allowed. That is for the distinguished senator to take a bow and go. Thank you.
Is it? Is it the wish that the distinguished colleague? No.
I stand to second.
Nobody.
Yes.
Ably moved by the majority leader.
Yes.
That the wish of the Senate, the mood of the Senate, is that this gentleman of honor, who is almost like Mr. President in terms of integrity, should take a bow. I just second.
Is it the wish of these colleagues that our colleague Senator Ministerial Udo Udoma take a bow and go? Yes. Senator, you can take a bow.
Former Chief Whip